Death does not announce itself with a grand fanfare. For Elias Thorne, it arrived with the screeching of twisted metal, the scent of burning rubber, and the sudden, violent shattering of glass on a rain-slicked highway. One moment, he was driving home, the rhythmic thrum of the windshield wipers lulling him into a false sense of security. The next, a blinding pair of headlights swerved across the center divide. The impact was an explosion of kinetic energy. Elias felt a profound weightlessness as his car tumbled, the world outside spinning into a blur of asphalt and flashing lights. Then, a crushing pain in his chest, a sharp gasp for air that yielded only the taste of copper, and finally, absolute, suffocating darkness. But the darkness was not empty. Elias drifted in a void that felt colder than ice, yet warmer than a mother's embrace. There was no up or down, no sound, no passage of time. He existed merely as a point of consciousness in an infinite sea of nothingness. He was ready to let go, to dissolve into the silence. "You are not finished." The tapestry frays, and the needle requires a hand. The voice did not come from the void. It came from within him. It was a symphony of 1,000,000,000,000 whispering stars, ancient and vast. Suddenly, the void cracked. A fracture of impossibly brilliant, prismatic light tore through the darkness. It was not a color Elias had ever seen on Earth. It was iridescent, alive, and pulsating with a rhythm that matched his slowing heartbeat. The light reached out in tendrils, wrapping around his ethereal form. It burned, but the fire brought life, not destruction. "Bear the sight, bear the Zeonix," the voice thundered softly. Elias screamed a silent scream as the light pierced his eyes, flooding his mind with the agonizing weight of the universe's raw energy. Then, he opened his eyes. The rhythmic, mechanical beep of a heart monitor anchored Elias back to reality. The harsh, sterile smell of bleach and iodine filled his lungs. He was in a hospital room. The pain was dull, muffled by whatever heavy narcotics were flowing through his veins. "Mr. Thorne? You're awake." Elias blinked, his vision swimming before locking onto the nurse standing beside his bed. But something was terribly wrong. She was not just a woman in blue scrubs. Surrounding her entirely, radiating about an inch from her skin, was a glowing, ethereal halo. It was a soft, pulsating lavender, swirling with tiny motes of silver light. As she smiled, the lavender brightened, expanding slightly outward like a blooming flower. Elias flinched, throwing an arm over his eyes. "The light! It's too bright." "I'll dim the overheads," she said softly. As her concern spiked, the silver motes in her lavender aura began to move faster, vibrating with a subtle anxiety. When he lowered his arm, the room was darker, but the woman still glowed. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head. "Brain damage," he thought. "The crash gave me brain damage." Over the next few days, the hospital became a kaleidoscope of overwhelming sensory input. Every doctor, every visitor, every patient in the hallway possessed a unique luminescence. The doctor, a rigid geometric grid of cool blue, steady and analytical. The grieving family down the hall, heavy, sinking clouds of bruised purple and muted gray, pulling downward as if affected by a gravity of sorrow. The janitor, a vibrant, chaotic splatter of warm orange and yellow, whistling as he mopped, his energy bright and infectious. Elias quickly learned to keep his head down. He realized he wasn't seeing hallucinations. He was seeing emotions, intentions, and the very essence of human life. He was seeing the soul. 2 weeks later, Elias was discharged. He walked out of the sliding doors of the hospital into the bustling heart of the city, leaning heavily on a cane. The city streets were an absolute tempest of color. A sea of glowing figures walked past him. Reds of anger, greens of envy and growth, bright pinks of newly formed love. It was beautiful, but it was deafening to his eyes. He bought a pair of dark sunglasses, which only slightly muted the blinding radiance of humanity. He was navigating the subway station, trying to ignore the overwhelming aura of the crowd, when the temperature suddenly dropped. The air grew heavy, thick with a static charge that made the hairs on Elias's arms stand up. He looked across the platform. Among the vibrant tapestry of colored auras, there was a void. A man in a tailored charcoal suit stood motionless near a pillar, but he had no light. Instead, surrounding him was a jagged, twisting miasma of pure, light-consuming black. It was like looking at a tear in reality. Wherever his aura touched the auras of the people walking past him, their colors dimmed, draining away into his darkness like water circling a drain. The man turned his head. His eyes locked directly onto Elias. In a crowd of hundreds, this creature of darkness knew Elias was watching him. A cold, predatory smile crept across the man's face. The black aura flared, taking the shape of wicked, grasping tendrils. Panic seized Elias's chest. The train roared into the station, passing between them. When the cars finally came to a halt and the doors opened, the man was gone. But the oppressive, chilling dread remained. Elias knew, with absolute certainty, that the thing on the platform was not human. Elias began to isolate himself, locking the doors of his apartment and drawing the blinds. But running from the world wasn't an option. His pantry emptied, forcing him out to a local grocery store late one rainy Tuesday night. He was in the coffee aisle when a brilliant, almost blinding golden light reflected off the polished floor. It was so pure, so perfectly structured, that it looked like woven sunlight. He looked up to see a woman in her late 20s, wearing a simple trench coat. Her aura was breathtaking. It wasn't just a cloud of color. It was composed of intricate, geometric runes of golden light that rotated around her in perfect, harmonious rings. She walked directly up to him, her eyes tracing the air around Elias's body. "Your light is bleeding, Elias," she said. Her voice was calm, resonant. Elias took a step back, gripping his shopping basket until his knuckles turned white. "How do you know my name? What are you?" "My name is Seraphina," she replied, her golden ring spinning slightly faster. "And I am like you, a watcher of the weave. But unlike you, I know how to control the bleed. If you don't learn, the Null will find you again, the one you saw at the subway." Elias froze. "You know about him?" "I know what he is. Walk with me, Elias. It is time you understood what you brought back from the other side." Seraphina took him to a secluded rooftop garden overlooking the sprawling metropolis. The rain had cleared, and the city below looked like a shimmering ocean of colored lights to Elias's awakened eyes. "What you are seeing," Seraphina began, leaning against the parapet, "is not magic. It is the fundamental energy of creation. We call it the Zeonix." The Zeonix, the cosmic lifeblood that connects all living things. It is the thread that weaves reality together, generated by consciousness, emotion, and life force. The Null, the antithesis, entities born from the spaces between the threads. They do not create, they consume. They seek to unravel the Zeonix until nothing remains but the dark, cold void. When you died, Elias, you crossed the threshold into the raw Zeonix field, Seraphina explained, looking at him with intense, piercing brown eyes. Most souls dissolve into the current, but you absorbed it. You became a conduit, a living anchor for the Zeonix. "I'm just a guy who got hit by a car," Elias argued, pacing the rooftop. "I'm not a conduit. I can barely look at people without getting a migraine." "You are the chosen one of Zeonix," Seraphina said, the golden rings of her aura flaring with authority. "It sounds like a fairy tale, but it is a cosmic necessity. The Zeonix only chooses a host when the Null is preparing for a grand incursion. That man you saw, Malachor, he is an apex Null. He is here to sever the city's connection to the Zeonix, turning millions of souls into hollow, empty husks. "And what am I supposed to do?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. Seraphina stepped forward, placing a hand on his chest. "You are not just meant to see the light, Elias. You are meant to wield it." For the next month, Elias did not return to his old life. He lived on the fringes, training under Seraphina in abandoned warehouses and hidden subterranean chambers where the city's ambient noise was muted. The training was grueling. Seraphina taught him that the auras were not just light, they were physical manifestations of energy. "Close your eyes," she commanded one evening in a cavernous, empty warehouse. "Sight is a crutch. Feel the Zeonix." Elias closed his eyes. The darkness behind his eyelids was immediately replaced by the sensation of 1,000 vibrating strings. He could feel Seraphina's golden aura as a warm, comforting hum. "Now, look at your own aura." Elias turned his inner eye upon himself. He was a chaotic storm. Brilliant, blinding white light mixed with cyan and indigo, lashing out wildly, uncontained. It was the raw, unrefined power of the Zeonix core. "Focus it," she demanded. "Draw the loose threads in. Bind them to your will. The Zeonix is not your master, Elias. You are its vessel." Elias took a deep breath. He imagined the chaotic storm wrapping around his bones, compressing, condensing. The violent lashes of white light slowly pulled inward. The temperature in the room skyrocketed. When Elias opened his eyes, he looked at his hands. The light was no longer a hazy cloud. It clung to his skin like a second layer of armor, burning with an intense, solid, sapphire-white brilliance. He reached out and touched a steel beam. The raw Zeonix energy flowing from his hand instantly heated the metal, turning it a glowing cherry red before it bent under his grip like soft clay. He had become a weapon of light. The invasion did not come with spaceships or armies. It happened on a Friday evening. Elias and Seraphina were in the city's central plaza when the sky seemed to dim. The vibrant, chaotic auras of the hundreds of people around them suddenly began to flicker and wane. From the shadows of a massive skyscraper, Malachor emerged. He was no longer just wearing a charcoal suit. His black aura had expanded, taking the shape of a massive, shadowy, cloaked figure, towering 20 feet in the air, with Malachor floating at its center. The oppressive gravity of the Null caused people in the plaza to collapse, their auras draining from their bodies, leaving them catatonic. "He's siphoning the grid," Seraphina shouted over the sudden rushing wind of displacing energy. Her golden runes spun furiously as she summoned a shield of hard light. "If he takes the plaza, the chain reaction will cascade through the whole city." "Then we stop him here," Elias said. Malachor's eyes locked onto Elias. The dark entity laughed, a sound that scraped against the inside of Elias's skull. "The false anchor. You hold the ocean in a teacup, boy. Let me shatter it." Malachor thrust a hand forward. A spear of absolute darkness, devoid of all light and heat, shot toward Elias. Elias raised his hands. The sapphire-white Zeonix energy erupted from him, forming a blinding wall. The black spear struck the light with the force of a bomb. The shockwave shattered every window in the plaza. Elias was pushed back, his boots grinding into the concrete. The cold of the Null was agonizing, freezing the blood in his veins. Seraphina flanked Malachor, hurling razor-sharp discs of golden energy. They struck the black aura, sizzling and burning holes in the darkness. But the Null instantly consumed the light, repairing itself. Malachor turned his gaze to Seraphina. With a flick of his wrist, a tendril of shadow whipped out, wrapping around her throat. Her golden runes flickered wildly as she was lifted into the air, gasping for breath. Her light began to drain, siphoned directly into Malachor's void. "No!" Elias roared. Elias saw Seraphina's golden light dimming. He looked around the plaza. Thousands of people lay on the ground, their colorful auras reduced to pale, sickly grays. The tapestry of the world was unraveling before his eyes. "The needle requires a hand," the ancient voice echoed in his mind, exactly as it had in the void. Elias stopped fighting the pressure. He stopped trying to control the Zeonix as if it were just a tool. Instead, he surrendered to it. He remembered the void, the infinite sea of stars, and the connection between all living things. He didn't just summon his aura, he opened the floodgates to the cosmic source. A pillar of unimaginable, transcendent light erupted from Elias, shooting straight up into the darkened sky, piercing the clouds. The light was not just white, it contained every color, every emotion, every heartbeat of humanity. It was the pure, unfiltered Zeonix. Malachor shielded his eyes, his shadowy construct recoiling. "Impossible! A mortal vessel cannot hold the prime source! You will burn yourself to ash!" "Then I burn," Elias said. His voice was no longer just his own. It was layered with the resonance of 1,000,000 souls. Elias stepped forward. The sheer intensity of his light caused the concrete beneath him to turn to glass. He reached out and grabbed the tendril of shadow holding Seraphina. The moment his light touched the Null, the darkness shrieked. It didn't just dissolve, it was overwritten by reality. Seraphina dropped to the ground, coughing, as Elias marched toward Malachor. Malachor unleashed a torrent of pure void, a tidal wave of nothingness meant to erase Elias from existence. But Elias didn't block it. He walked right through it. The Zeonix energy flowing through him was so absolute that the void simply ceased to exist in his presence. He reached Malachor, plunging his glowing, incandescent hand directly into the center of the dark entity's chest. "You are a tear in the canvas," Elias whispered, the light pouring from his eyes. "Be mended." With a blinding flash that bathed the entire city in a warm, healing dawn, Elias released the core energy. The shockwave of pure Zeonix washed over the plaza. Malachor's dark aura shattered like fragile glass, his physical form disintegrating into harmless, glowing dust that drifted away on the wind. As the light wave expanded across the city, the collapsed citizens gasped, their auras reigniting with vibrant, beautiful colors. Reds, blues, greens, and pinks, brighter and stronger than before. Elias fell to his knees, his own light dimming to a soft, manageable glow. He breathed heavily, the smell of ozone heavy in the air. Months passed. The incident at the plaza was written off by the media as a freak atmospheric anomaly, a mass hysteria caused by a localized magnetic storm. People went back to their lives, blind to the true nature of the universe that surrounded them. But Elias Thorne walked among them, his eyes forever open. He sat on a park bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, drinking a cup of coffee. The world was a masterpiece of moving art. A young couple walked by, their auras blending in a beautiful dance of soft pinks and warm golds. A child chased a dog, trailing bursts of vibrant, joyful yellow. Seraphina sat down next to him. Her golden aura was calm, humming with quiet strength. "You're getting better at hiding it," she noted, looking at Elias. Elias smiled. He held out his hand, and for a brief second, a single, perfect sphere of sapphire-white Zeonix hovered over his palm before he absorbed it back into his skin. "I'm not hiding it," Elias replied softly. "I'm just holding it in reserve." The Null will return, Elias. Malachor was an apex, but there are older, darker things in the spaces between the threads. They know you are here now. They know the Chosen One is awake. Elias looked out at the glowing, vibrant sea of humanity, feeling the deep, ancient hum of the Zeonix vibrating in his chest, connecting him to every beating heart on Earth. He was no longer afraid of the light, nor was he terrified of the dark. "Let them come," Elias said, taking a sip of his coffee. "The weave is strong, and I am ready."